Hello, this is Goatman Philosophy here, and today we're going to talk about the global paradigm of conflict for the year 2024. So, I was very deliberate to not label this as a World War III video because I think the idea of World War III is a bit misleading. World War III, that label implies, cohesion, concentration, and total war, between the major states involved. Well, in this situation, while I do believe that the power of nuclear weapons is enough to dissuade, major powers, nuclear powers, from going to war directly with each other, at least to some extent, then, what I'm saying is that countries will find other ways to express their desire for aggression. And so we have a tendency where, like many wars, there is a power that is benefiting more in the status quo, and then there are powers that are doing worse in the status quo. There are powers who feel resentful, they feel envious, they feel disadvantaged, they feel resentful, they feel like victims. All types of things where they feel that they are justified in attacking another country. And so, with that being the case, the way what's going to happen is that war will continue to happen, and it seems that the amount of war will increase. I expect that the amount of war will increase this year, but I don't expect it to be a nuclear war. So I'm expecting countries to manifest their desire for violence in a different way. So that's why, for example, that Russia attacked Ukraine. Ukraine, despite getting support from NATO countries, is not a NATO country, so it doesn't have the nominal or obligatory support of Article 5 that would require the entire NATO alliance, and including the United States, to fight back alongside it. So, let's see. Let's go ahead and take a look. So, as you may know, Russia has made some progress in Ukraine. So, if I was to, if I could draw a line, which I might be able to do here, then, excuse me. So, I probably shouldn't bother too much with this, but, as of this time, the current borders broadly, look like this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but let's just say it's like that. So, all right, never mind. So, all right, with that being the case, let's just ignore that for now. So let's just follow the cursor here. So the Russian line of control is currently along the southern bank of the Dnieper, while east of the Dnieper, around Zaporizhia, and further to the east, the Ukrainians still have a significant area of control, bordering the Russians, while the Russians tend to broadly control this southern area. So many people want to believe that the Ukrainians will win, and many people want to believe that the Ukrainians are efficient and, whatever. But, realistically, no matter how much equipment that we're giving them, the issue is that they're going to run out of manpower. So men are still leaving the country, and, they're running out of men to, staff their armed forces. And specifically, I'm at least referring to trained soldiers. So, they are not using a rotation system with their frontline units, which is resulting in a more worse type of attrition and a less efficient system for them. So there's a high chance that the Ukraine war will continue through the entirety of this year, but there's also some chance that the Ukrainians will break this year. And so I consider it likely that the Ukrainians will have to settle for ceding some more territory to Russia. Now, to be fair, I might as well state, when this war first started, I remember where I was, I looked at that map and I thought, Russia, I expected Russia to annex all territory east of the Dnieper. And, I would say that's not likely to happen this year. So I think, with the current rate of progress, it would take more time for Russia to achieve that goal. So if Russia is willing to settle for taking the 4 provinces that they claim to have annexed earlier, these 4 over in this area, then they could probably go for a peace settlement this year. And yes, people have noted that they do not control the entirety of these territories, but I think they'd be willing to skip that if they really need to cut the war short while they're ahead. So anyway, if I don't claim to be an expert, but I estimate that if Russia really wanted to annex all land east of the Dnieper, the war may last until 2026. That'd be my estimate. And then, so I might as well note what kind of paradigm I'm going to be using here, because I did use that word. So the paradigm I'm going to be using is, I'm going to call it blue team, red team, green team. So the reason I'm using these labels is because I think that if I was to use a more descriptive label, it would actually be misleading. And I don't want to give off, a false impression if I can help it. So blue team, I consider that the power that benefits more from the status quo antebellum. So that would include countries like the United States, Canada, Guyana, the NATO countries, and Ukraine, maybe Israel to a lesser extent, perhaps India, and Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. So I'm not saying these all countries are all very happy with the status quo, but I consider them to be more so on the defensive, except perhaps for Israel, and then another country that I plan to mention later. So let me briefly show you the chart I have here. So using this software. Let me expand that. I just want to make it look nice. Nice. Here we go. And then I want to move that over here. Okay, so here we have blue team, red team, green team. So you might be asking, what is green team? So green team, I think, are the factions or countries that are not really aligned with either side. So, so let's say for blue team, I would list United States, India, the NATO countries, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Israel, Jordan, and then probably some other countries, Guyana. And then for red team, here I listed Russia, Pakistan, the CSTO countries, China, North Korea, so Mongolia. I think Mongolia might be forced into this, so Mongolia might be green team. I think Mongolia might be more so green team. So if forced compliance, I think, does count as green team. So, all right, North Korea, Iran. Let's see, who else? Western Yemen. So the Houthis. So for blue team, I'd be willing to list the Eastern Yemen. And then we need to expand this box here a little bit more. Okay, and then, all right, so going further, who else would be on red team? So I don't want to get ahead of myself. Okay, let's include Venezuela for red team. And then for green team, I'm tempted to say Brazil. Let's include Brazil in green team. All right, so anyway, let's get back to the world map here. So, all right, next, we have Ukraine and we have Russia. And so, Russia, they're not satisfied with the status quo. Under the Soviet Union, they basically had an empire, sort of a communist empire. But I don't want to, that could be a misleading statement. So, don't take that completely as fact. Now, however, Russia, they have organized something called the CSTO, which is an alliance of multiple countries that's like an equivalent to NATO. And, I'm not sure how far that goes, but it does include countries like Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan is a sympathetic state. So, we might as well include Kazakhstan. And then there is at least a rumor or some signs that Russia is interested in annexing or attacking Uzbekistan. So for that reason, I might as well include Uzbekistan in either blue team or green team. So I don't consider Uzbekistan very close to the United States. So I would currently put it in green team. Correct me if I'm wrong. So anyway, so we know about the Ukraine conflict. That's already been going on for 2 years, and then we recently had the new Israeli-Palestinian or Hamas war currently going on. So currently, Israeli ground forces are still invading the Gaza Strip, and their ostensible mission is the destruction of Hamas. And I'm not sure, how long they're really going to be there. I'm not sure how far they're going to go. But the conflict is very provocative. And so, I would include, I believe that other countries and organizations would be interested in participating in this conflict to, potentially take down Israel. So I think multiple countries are interested in, destroying Israel or attacking Israel or making Israel weaker. So I would include, Hezbollah. So Hezbollah is not a country, but they're kind of sort of a dominant force in Lebanon, but they don't represent the government of Lebanon. Let's see. So I would include Iraq as well in red team, maybe in green team. So let's put Iraq in green team because I don't think they're going to be a very active participant in the paradigm of conflict. All right, so we have Hezbollah, and then let's see. So I think that Hezbollah, depending on how things go, they may be interested in escalating their conflict with Israel. And Hamas, I have to wonder, why did they even do that October attack? Because they would anticipate that the Israeli retaliation would be quite brutal or strong. And I think that might have been the intent. The intent might have been to provoke the Israeli ground forces to attack, either to galvanize the people of Gaza and Palestine and others to further resist Israel and garner support for themselves as the anti-Israeli faction in Gaza. And so this might have been their plan the whole time. I don't really know. All right. So anyway, so the Yemenis, specifically the Houthis, have been wanting to get involved in this conflict. So they've been escalating their attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. And I've also heard recently about some American Marines going missing off the coast of Somalia. So there's some risk that there's some type of crossover happening here. So it seems like the United States has been wrapping up or will need to ramp up its operations in the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the Western Indian Ocean to counteract the effect of the Houthis and potentially Somali pirates. So in this situation, it seems that the Houthis and the Somali pirates will have a similar effect on global shipping and global commerce. And so with that being the case, I might as well transition to my next area of focus here, which is actually Ethiopia and Eritrea. So there are some signals that Ethiopia is actually interested in attacking Eritrea. I believe the president of Ethiopia said that he's interested in seizing the coastline of Eritrea so that Ethiopia can have its own port. And to be fair, having a port can make a big difference. So, with that being the case, the Ethiopians may want to attack Eritrea this year. If you had to ask me, I think the probability of that happening are from 25 to 75%. They've had, border conflicts in the recent past, and so they can just as well resume again. Now, to be fair, with Ethiopia being the aggressor, I do not think the United States would be an enthusiastic supporter of the Ethiopians, but what I think would happen is that unless perhaps they can frame the Eritrean government as despotic, and then perhaps there might be some way that the invasion of Eritrea could be framed as like pro-democracy or pro-freedom, and maybe they'd want the Ethiopians to mimic the American style of warmongering, of claiming to be righteous and claiming to spread democracy and do nation building or something, and then so Ethiopia could invade and at least use some rhetoric like that and take some measures along those lines, and then use the power of violence to secure a port, for their shipping of goods, and then possibly make Eritrea a protectorate. I'm really just kind of speculating off the cuff here, but I can at least imagine that scenario happening. Let's see. So, as for Sudan, we might as well mention that. So there's currently still a civil war happening between the Sudanese army and the RSF. So the Sudanese army is broadly, more so on blue team, while the RSF is more so aligned with red team. And, based on my knowledge, I would expect the Sudanese army to win that conflict, but I'm not super confident about that. I'd only slightly give their chances above 50%, if that makes sense. So maybe 55 to 60% probability of the Sudanese army defeating the RSF. And then that chance of that happening this year is not super high. I'd put the chance of the Sudanese civil war finishing this year at about 10 to 25%. I'd estimate it may take another 2 or 3 years for the Sudanese civil war to finish, but whatever. That's just my intuition. Let's see. So I think South Sudan wants to stay neutral in this. They'd probably be green team. Egypt. So Egypt is an interesting scenario. Is an interesting case. It's hard to categorize Egypt because, they've taken measures to normalize their relations with Israel, but at the same time they're receiving refugees from Gaza, and obviously other forces and other countries in the region might be calling upon them to help take a stand against Israel, as part of a greater common cause. And so, it's not clear how that would go, but I do think that one of the main ideas I want to convey here is that I think when it comes to the alignment of powers for this paradigm, it's more so based on concrete interests of each country and not so much ideology. So, if you look at this, this table here, the ideologies of these countries, there are some correlations here, of course, like, democracy, authoritarianism, whatever, but it's not, I don't think that's the driving force of this paradigm of conflict. So that's why I took the label blue team, red team, green team. And for that reason, and along those lines, I think that Egypt, the decision that they'll make with regards to how they align with regards to the Israel-Palestine conflict will probably be more based on their concrete practical interests than on ideological interests. So, if they consider it impractical to side against Israel, I don't think they're going to do it. All right, so anyway, where was I? The next point I wanted to make about Egypt is that they're currently threatened by Ethiopia, in the sense that Ethiopia built the Grand Renaissance Dam around the Blue Nile, which will restrict the flow of water up the Nile, which will cause great insecurity in Egypt. So, Egypt has some motivation to attack Ethiopia. And the logistics of attacking across Ethiopia by land would be quite difficult, especially with the current civil war. But it's feasible, it's plausible that the Egyptians may want to do an airstrike or a missile strike against the Ethiopians in order to destroy or damage the Grand Renaissance Dam if they cannot reach a peaceful agreement with regards to the distribution of water. So one possibility here that is kind of more emergent is that the Ethiopians and the Egyptians may have different preferences with regards to the RSF and the Sudanese army. So I can't really tell you how it would go, but it's plausible that between Egypt and Ethiopia, that one side would favor the RSF and the other side will favor the Sudanese army. And that would be based on either, Egypt passing through to get to Ethiopia, getting some aid against Ethiopia, or the other side, the Ethiopians, using one party as a buffer against the other. So I consider Ethiopia to be slightly leaning towards blue team. And based on what I just said, I'm tempted to believe that Egypt is leaning towards red team. So based on their interests with regards to, Islam and Palestine and other similar issues, and with the issue they have with Ethiopia, I think that Egypt would have an interest potentially in supporting the RSF. If the RSF could guarantee their free access to Ethiopia. That's if the RSF has enough ground control to facilitate military access. If they don't, then what I'm saying is not that relevant, or let's just put it that way. So I'll just leave that there for now. So next, I want to talk about Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is on blue team. I don't think they are very excited about being on blue team, and I don't think they have their hearts in it that much, but they lean towards blue team nonetheless. So part of being on blue team is a correlation with Sunni Islam. I don't know why, but that seems to be how it is. So Saudi Arabia, they tried to resist the Houthis themselves, and it didn't go so well. So currently, they're not taking a very active role against the Houthis, or the Shia Muslims in Yemen, Western Yemen. And Saudi Arabia is broadly aligned to at least tolerate the existence of Israel. However, so Saudi Arabia is known to have a strategic alignment against the state of Iran. And, geographically, these countries seem to be of similar size, but you can see that the land of Saudi Arabia is much less hospitable than that of Iran. And if I had to guess, I would expect that the population of Iran is much greater than that of Saudi Arabia, though the oil production of Saudi Arabia may be greater than that of Iran. Anyway, so Saudi Arabia would not be a very enthusiastic member of blue team, but they're on blue team nonetheless. And I think that their motivation to act as a member of blue team will be based on their own personal antagonism with countries like Iran or the Houthi faction in Yemen. So, they're currently not active against the Houthis, but I do believe there's a high chance that they will resume operations against them, especially if aligned with other states like the United States. So I do believe that the Saudis may have an interest in attacking Qatar. Now, Qatar, so that would put Qatar in green team, because I think Qatar is a bit strategically isolated and also a bit conflicted. So, all right, with that being the case, due to the risk of Saudi Arabia attacking Qatar, Qatar may have to forge its own course, or may cause a conflict between Saudi Arabia and other members of blue team. And it may cause Qatar to side with red team. The Iranians or other factions may want to support Qatar against Saudi Arabia, because that may be for their interests. All right, so let's move up north here. So with Syria and Lebanon, Syria, like Lebanon, would be aligned on towards red team. And so we know the Turks have already invaded northern Syria and seem to be, de facto annexing territory in northern Syria, and that may continue. They currently have that campaign against the Kurds, and I could say more, but I'll try not to. So, but with Syria, they'll be aligned towards red team, but I don't think they'll be very active because they've been so devastated by their civil war. And I think something similar happened with Iraq. So it seems that Iraq has been aligned towards red team, specifically Iran, since the withdrawal of the United States. And I'm sure that the invasion and occupation by the United States has caused a lot of bad blood and a lot of resentment amongst the Iraqi people, and I can understand. Kuwait, I think Kuwait would lean towards blue team, but in a kind of a passive way. And then I'd say the same about Bahrain due to its military access it provides to the United States with its naval base. And then United Arab Emirates, I believe, sides towards blue team in terms of supporting the Eastern Sunni Yemenis. And for Oman, I believe Oman would either lean towards blue team or would just be green team in the sense of being independent. All right, so next we have the Caucasus region. So I would say that Armenia, de jure, should be red team. But based on the recent war that they had with Azerbaijan, I would actually label them as green team. So because they did not really get that much support from Russia. And so I believe that if Azerbaijan kind of represents the interests of Iran and Pakistan or aligns with those interests, and if it may be the case that Russia prefers to align with the interests of Iran and Pakistan over those of Armenia, which is very, a bit tragic, but that seems plausible. So I would place Azerbaijan in red team and Armenia in green team. And then I would say Georgia would be in blue team. So Georgia, I think, like many of these other countries, would take a more defensive role. But, if Russia seems weak, I think they could campaign against South Ossetia and Abkhazia. And they may want to reestablish control of those regions to at least strengthen their control. And then we might as well rotate to the European theater. And then I might as well mention the rivalry between Greece and Turkey. So it's well known that they have an antagonistic relationship with each other. And, I believe they're both NATO members. And so if they were to, go to war, that would sort of cause a contradiction in the NATO system. So I would say, in terms of the paradigm that I'm establishing here, I'm not going to write it down, but basically, off the cuff, I think that Turkey would, if it goes to war with Greece, then that's going to put it basically on green team because they're part of NATO, they have a strategic interest against Russia, but they also have historical grievances with Greece. And so if they go Sigma mode and attack Greece, which I think is more likely than the opposite, then that would put them in green team. And so that would keep Greece in blue team, but they kind of have their own struggle, and then other countries that don't hate Turkey are not going to be that motivated to help the Greeks against the Turks. And then as for the Balkans, I think Serbia could lean towards red team, but I don't think they'd be very motivated to take very aggressive action. And then in a similar way, I would expect Bosnia to lean towards blue team, but to not be very active either. Let's see. So, all right, let's keep going here. I don't have much to say about North Africa or West Africa beyond what I've said already, but I do believe that Niger and Mali, or at least I believe currently the government of Niger after the coup would lean towards red team. So let's put Niger in red team. Let's just say that for now, and then as far as Mali and Nigeria, I'll put them in green team. So they might lean towards blue team, but I can't say that much. I think they got their own struggles. They got other problems to work on, and so they don't want to worry too much about a global conflict. And I'd also put South Africa in green team, but it's not too urgent to say. So we might as well, first of all, cover Iran. So Iran obviously is red team. And interesting thing is that, apart from their, rivalries with Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States, they now have a border conflict with Afghanistan. Not necessarily a full-scale war, but they are having some disputes, I believe, about various issues, such as the flow of water. And so that's why I put Afghanistan in green team. So it'd be like, I don't want to be the guy who says that Afghanistan is going to ally with the United States in 2024, but there's this interesting thing that now that Afghanistan is no longer fighting the Americans, now they can go back to having normal country problems, so to speak, in terms of like having conflicts with your neighbors. So, Afghanistan, they have border problems with Iran, and they also have border problems with Pakistan, which are both on red team. So I don't want to be the guy who says that Afghanistan is going to join blue team, but they're definitely going to be involved in terms of the global landscape of conflict. All right, so anyway, we got Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. So most of these countries are part of the CSTO, except for Uzbekistan, I believe. I believe Uzbekistan has given military access to the United States for Air Force bases. So Uzbekistan may lead towards blue team, but again, I think they're a bit isolated, similar to Mongolia. They may be compelled to submit, or they have to kind of fight on their own without much support. All right, so if there's an Uzbek-Afghan alliance, that might be their best option. I'm not sure. So anyway, back over here. So here we have China in the Himalayan region. So you know that about 4 years ago, actually, there was a border conflict in the mountains between India and China. And so some people died and some people were injured. And part of that conflict was the Chinese encroachment onto the territory of not only India, but also Nepal and Bhutan. So India has played a role in upholding the territorial sovereignty of both Nepal and Bhutan. So for that reason, I would label both Nepal and Bhutan as being blue team countries. I do know that in 2006 there was a Maoist revolution, or sort of a takeover of the country that happened, and I don't know if the country is still Maoist or not. But like I said before, it seems that concrete interests are overriding ideology in this current paradigm. All right, Bangladesh, I don't have so much to say about Bangladesh. I think Bangladesh will be more of a green team country. I don't think they're very eager to participate in either side. I don't think they want to get in anyone's way. Similar to the other countries I referenced earlier, they have many problems in their own territory, and I don't think they want to get involved in the wars of other countries. Now, Burma. So Burma, I would label, or Myanmar, I would label as a green team country. So they are still going through a civil war between the military junta and various, anti-junta groups. And it's currently projected for the rebels, basically the anti-junta group, to win the war. So I would give a 50 to 90% estimate that the junta will be defeated this year. And then I would say the resulting government would lean towards blue team ideologically, but I think due to the devastation of war, they would not want to get involved in the conflicts of other countries. And also at the same time, China, it depends on Burma for access to the Indian Ocean. There's established infrastructure in this region that China makes use of, and they would not want that disrupted. So the concrete interest of maintaining the flow of trade will override any ideological concerns about whether it's a military junta or a non-junta government in control of Burma. So, that'd be my analysis. And so, due to the devastation of war, I would expect Burma to have a very passive role in this situation. I might as well mention that recently there was some shelling in southwest China in the Yunnan region by Burmese forces that led to the deaths of 5 Chinese citizens, which was unfortunate. And if such things continue to happen, it would provoke the Chinese into potentially intervening in that conflict. but I think the probability of that is below 50%. It might be below 30 or 40% for this year. So anyway, here we got China. China's big. China is sort of the main character in this region. So as they share a border with Russia, and they have Mongolia in between. And Mongolia, they might want to, not really line up with Red Team, but I do think they would be compelled to give military access to Red Team. They have such a low population. I just don't think they can do much to resist. So anyway, we have China here, and we have Taiwan. And so Taiwan, also known as the Republic of China, is just it's constantly in this state of tension. They might get invaded, they might not. I think the current chance of China invading Taiwan this year is about 10%, if I had to say. I say that because there are many issues in both the Chinese economy and the Chinese society and the Chinese military that would make it kind of unwise to attack Taiwan right now. But there are also some factors that would make it convenient to attack Taiwan, but it's also extremely risky. And so I'm currently putting the probability of a Chinese naval invasion to about 10% this year. All right, Taiwan is definitely part of Blue Team, like they have to be. And then let's go a bit further south first. So we have Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. So I can't say too much, but as of right now, but I would definitely put Vietnam in Blue Team. So Vietnam, they have a long history of fighting the Chinese, and I think, they've improved relations with the United States a lot, since the Vietnam War. And so I would say that Vietnam can be part of a anti-Chinese coalition in Asia. All right, and in a similar way, I'm not really sure. All right, let me start with what I'm certain about. So I do believe Philippines would definitely be part of Blue Team. They're aligned against the Chinese and in favor of the U.S. quite strongly. I'd also put Malaysia and Indonesia as part of Blue Team. Not necessarily as active or eager participants, but the Chinese have taken action to, basically encroach on the territorial waters of these countries, and that could motivate them to at least passively lean towards Blue Team, such as like giving military access. All right, and then for Red Team, I would definitely add Cambodia due to their alignment with China, and then potentially Laos and possibly Thailand. So currently I would put Laos and Thailand in Green Team because I don't think they would be highly motivated right now to really participate in either side. I think Laos, if not Green Team, they'd be in Red Team. So siding with China. I think that's plausible. While with Thailand, I feel like it's plausible for them to be on either Blue Team or Red Team, but I think they have strong reasons to not get involved because it would just be very bad for them. I don't think it'd be worth it. All right, so let's go back to Northeast Asia. So I said before that with, in this current paradigm, Blue Team is sort of more the defensive, status quo, antebellum, favoring faction in this situation. But one exception to that is Japan, because Japan, they do have historical grievances, with, at least Russia. So, part of the resolution of World War II was the annexation of the Japanese territories in Sakhalin. And so Japan, if they had the strength, would like to annex probably more territory if they could. But I think in this situation, Japan is going to basically play a subordinate and supporting role to the United States in the West Pacific. So I think that in the case of China, in attacking Taiwan, the first country for Taiwan to depend on would be the United States, and then the second country would be Japan. So I think Japan, behind the United States, would be the most motivated to proactively resist Chinese aggression, in basically the Northwest Pacific, the area that this frame is currently focused on. All right, so both China and Japan, and I guess the Koreas as well, have aging populations, at least South Korea. I don't know about North Korea. But with South Korea, I think South Korea, they're still worried about North Korea. So North Korea is still the greatest threat to them. North Korea is also a threat to Japan, and it's a liability for China. Though North Korea was able to supply artillery shells to Russia recently, and North Korea, despite its vulnerabilities, does seem to have a strong artillery force, so they would be able to theoretically devastate the region around Seoul if a war was to resume, so to speak. So, anyway, that's going to be it for that section of the map. So, Papua New Guinea, I'm not sure. I would put Papua New Guinea on green team. Australia and New Zealand would definitely be on blue team. So Australia definitely feels threatened by China, and I think similar to Japan, they would be willing to help out Taiwan or other countries in case there was direct invasion happening. Let's see. This part of the globe over here is very empty. You would not want to be stranded here. There's probably some very small islands. All right, I don't want to bore you too much, but so anyway. Let's go to the Americas. So the United States obviously is on blue team. They are kind of the lead, the main character of blue team. If you look at red team, it's not, they don't really have like a main character in the same way. Like the United States, obviously they're pursuing their selfish interests. At least that's something we have to expect. But they can at least present the image of selflessness or ideological motivation, or because of their unusual position of like a, modern hegemon. So unlike other countries that would actually annex territories in foreign lands, the United States, while operating sort of like an imperial state, is also still a republic that, at least ostensibly, proclaims and upholds ideas of democracy and self-determination. So the United States, instead of, the techniques of previous types of imperial states, would instead use allied states and military access and global trade as sources of power and power projection. So the United States basically uses its power projection to basically establish a great buffer and prosperity zone for itself. So, by ensuring the safety of global travel, the safety of global trade, that's to the benefit of the United States. And so, let's see. Especially if we can, because of the status of the US dollar as a reserve currency, that leads towards the support of global trade as an interest of the United States, so that there would be increased dependency on the United States dollar as a reserve currency, therefore adding value to the currency and therefore allowing the United States government to spend more money and to get further into debt without having to pay its obligations or to pay its bills. All right, so anyway, Canada obviously leans towards blue team. They're not going to be as militant as the United States, but they're still going to be part of it. Let's see. As for Mexico and other countries in Central America, I really don't know like how to label them in this paradigm. There is some risk of the United States sending military forces into Mexico due to the cartel, but I'm not saying that's super likely. I would say that's like a 5% chance of happening this year, and maybe a 10% chance next year. But anyway, I don't want to cap too much. So Cuba might lean towards red team, but I think they're having their own problems. I don't think they want to get involved. But down here we have Venezuela. We know Venezuela's been having a hard time. And if you look here, it seems that Google Earth is now accommodating the Venezuelan government by marking Essequibo with these dashed lines, which is a bit concerning. And then even Suriname is claiming Guyanese territory. So I kind of feel bad for Guyana right now. They're even getting bullied by Google Earth. So in case you don't know, Venezuela is currently claiming the territory of Guyana known as Essequibo. And so Essequibo has a lot of oil value, and it's also a huge part of the landmass of Guyana. So Venezuela is aligned against the United States. So theoretically, Venezuela could be supported by other members of Red Team, though the other members of Red Team might be quite occupied. Who knows? I think maybe the Chinese may have enough, surplus equipment to supply the Venezuelans potentially. But anyway, so the Venezuelans, for a variety of reasons, have some motivation to attack Guyana. And Guyana has a much smaller population and a much smaller military, but the defensive terrain could make it possible for the Guyanese to successfully defend their territory and at least deal heavy casualties to the Venezuelans. I think that if the Venezuelans attack Guyana, it could be quite farcical. It could be similar to the Winter War of 1939, when the Soviets lost large numbers of troops to the Finnish. I think Guyana could be similar to Finland in this scenario. Now, I do think Guyana could get support from other members of Blue Team, sympathetic countries like the United States. And I do think, in case you're interested in starting, or in case you happen to own or participate in a mercenary operation, I do think Guyana could be a good customer for a mercenary operation. I do think Guyana, they have a lot of oil money now, and I think they have a low population, so I think they'd be willing to hire mercenaries to support in the defense against Venezuela. So, an idea for you. All right, so anyway, there's not much else to say about South America. There's definitely some troubling things happening, in other parts of South America, but those things don't really line up with sort of what we've been talking about so far. So, even Argentina, I don't even know. I think Argentina is going to lean towards Blue Team, but it's not going to be, super, extremely enthusiastic or active in that regard. I'm kind of curious about this place called Edinburgh of the Seven Seas. It seems to be a small island, close to Inaccessible Island. I love that name. I remember reading about this before. I think it's surrounded by cliffs. And then over here, we got Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, Tristan da Cunha. Interesting. It's kind of interesting how there are these obscure islands out in the world. I'm kind of curious about them. If I had more money, I'd do a lot of traveling. But anyway, so that's my outline of the projected global conflict for the most part. Oh, I might as well mention Belarus is aligned with Red Team. Did I put them on there? Oh, I forgot to include Belarus. Yeah, Belarus is definitely part of Red Team. I think they're even called a union state with Russia. And, Wagner forces are currently deployed in western Belarus, either as a decoy or maybe to suppress Belarusian dissent against the current leader of that country. I think the risk of attacking the Baltic states is pretty low right now. I do think Russia will win the Ukraine war in the sense of annexing more Ukrainian territory, but I do think it is causing a heavy toll for them. I do think it would be extremely stupid, for Russia to start another war, another invasion, while they're still fighting Ukraine. It's the probability of Russia attacking another country while still fighting Ukraine is similar to the idea of China attacking Taiwan. It's probably a bad idea. If either of them did such a thing right now, I'd expect it to go extremely poorly, comparable to the potential Venezuelan invasion of Guyana. but it is possible. I'm not going to put it down. I think the probability of Russia attacking another country before the defeat of Ukraine is about 5%. 5 to 25%. I'll just say that. So, I think the Uzbekistans would fight back if they're invaded. I think the Baltic states would fight back. I think Georgia would fight back. The NATO states like Finland and others would fight back. So I just think Russia is probably just going to focus on Ukraine. They may want to scare other countries with the deployment of Wagner forces. Wagner forces might try to do independent operations in the Baltic states or other parts of Eastern Europe. But I do think Russia as a state will try to focus on defeating Ukraine and annexing more Ukrainian territory, either basically the provinces that they mostly occupy now, or potentially all lands east of the Dnieper, as I had originally anticipated. So anyway, that is my outline of the global conflict paradigm for the year of 2024. So I think like I said before, I think the chance of Ethiopia invading Eritrea is about 25 to 75% this year. I think Ethiopia could probably win against Eritrea, though they may have issues if other states intervene or if their own population rebels, such as the Somalis. I think the Tigrays, they've suffered a lot. I don't think they're going to try again to resist the Ethiopian government. I think the chance of the Venezuelans invading Guyana, I'd put that at 20%, honestly. It could be a bluff. But anyway, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I just wanted to, make some content and kind of share with you my view of how I view the situation. All right, so in case you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. There were some people who had some disagreeing comments on my latest video against the moderate vice attitude. And even now, I appreciate the comments of those who disagree with me, because that's better than getting no comments at all. And even people who disagree with me, they can, by reading their comments, I can get a sense of, what other people think, basically, how other people think apart from me. Of course, that's important. All right, so thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If I am advertising any products in the description, please buy them so that I can get some money, but I'm probably not going to do that because I don't have that set up and whatever. All right, thank you and good night.